Hey everybody, Bearded Rogue here. I'm actually recording this on early Sunday morning, just after midnight. The NXT Takeover special in Brooklyn is over. Um, Ring of Honor's big event, the two Evolve events that were going on this weekend, they're all over. SummerSlam is later on today. Um, and so, because it's such a wrestling weekend, I am back with another wrestling vlog. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about concussions, blood, the PG era, that sort of thing. I grew up watching and started watching during the 80s, during the rock and wrestling era, Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, cartoons, Cyndi Lauper, Captain Lou Albano, all of that stuff. And really started paying attention when the Ultimate Warrior showed up, the larger-than-life comic book characters, him, Randy Savage, Jake the Snake Roberts, all of that kind of stuff. The Undertaker. That's really where I started watching wrestling. But when the shift towards ECW and the more hardcore stuff happened, I was totally into that. It was one of the biggest things in my, I'd say, middle school, high school um, wrestling fandom, as it were. Like, it was the change that was happening in wrestling. Like, ECW totally changed the game. Um, and the hardcore style started showing up everywhere. And, there are a lot of wrestlers that I've been a huge fan of who adopted that style, or at least engaged with that style in some way. Mick Foley is probably my favorite wrestler of all time. If I had to pick just one, Mick, just consummate entertainer, constantly doing everything he can to try to entertain the audience, sometimes to a very unsafe and unhealthy degree. I don't necessarily approve of a lot of the choices he's made in his career, with unprotected chair shots or continuing matches after falling off of gigantic towering structures of doom, but they were always entertaining, and I know that they were always done from a place of love, from him trying to give the fans something they hadn't seen before, or something that would engage them the way that seeing Jimmy Snuka jump off the cage in Madison Square Garden engaged him when he was younger. So one of my biggest pieces of appreciation for him was how much he was willing to put himself and his body on the line to entertain everybody else. Like that, above and beyond him being an ultra nice person and a excellent on the mic, and just in general very good in the ring, especially at selling. He was doing what he did out of a place of love for the fans, and I think a lot of wrestlers are engaged that way. I think Daniel Bryan, in recent memory, kind of fills those roles again, and unfortunately he's no longer wrestling because of his style and the toll that it has taken on his body. And I think the toll that wrestlers have on their bodies is something that a lot of people don't really understand. It's looked at as fake fighting, and while it is a fictional athletic contest, the maneuvers that they're doing in the ring are very real. The chance for injury is very real. The ability required to do what they do and not hurt each other every single night is an amazing thing. They're engaged in a choreographed, live stage play that slipping up can cause somebody's life to totally change or even end. So it's unbelievable pressure on them to take care of each other and do what they need to do. And there's an unbelievable pressure on them to push the envelope and deliver entertainment to people and draw money. And it kind of is two things that work at odds. You know, they're in a business where the entirety of the business is keeping each other safe, but at the same time, uh, trying to impress the fans and their management with their willingness to go out there and put it all on the line. So it's a very interesting thing. You know, Daniel Bryan, like I said, his career as an in-ring competitor was a casualty of this kind of thing. I mean, it's not like he's only been wrestling for a little while, but like he worked matches at a just frantic pace, and did athletic moves that, you know, just were not the norm. It got him over. It made him a thrill to watch. He was so enjoyable to watch in the ring, but his style ultimately really hurt him. And you know, you've seen this a couple of other times. Edge, he had to end his career because of neck injuries. Stone Cold Steve Austin, one botched pile driver cut his career extremely short. You know, all of the wrestling world is kind of like gambling with your body for fame and fortune. And it happens to all of them at some point. Like even people like Kane, who seemingly are non-injurable, have actually had to be away from injuries due to injuries in recent years. Now, with him, it's very much wear and tear on his body over time, as opposed to a sudden traumatic thing. But injuries are just a reality in professional wrestling. It's something that happens pretty consistently. Almost every single wrestler has had at least one major one, most of which require surgery. And it leads to one of the things that concerns me the most in professional wrestling, and something that they've gotten better about recently, but you know, that's concussions and mental health care. You know, recently the WWE has been stepping forward to help take care of addiction issues and that sort of thing, which is one of the major contributors to a lot of early deaths in the professional wrestling business. And a lot of these are, you know, prescription medications, or, you know, things that they started doing to deal with the bumps and hazards of the road that then turned into bigger things. You know, concussions, on the other hand, is something that we really don't know nearly enough about. I'm really excited to see a lot of wrestlers starting to step forward and declare that they're going to be donating their brains for concussion study research to see what the long-term effects of concussions are. And you know, the most tragic example, of course, being Chris Benoit. I was a huge Chris Benoit fan. I still am to this day. His in-ring work is unbelievable. He has a smash mouth style that combines chain wrestling with just unbelievable intensity. You know, they called him the Rabid Wolverine. They called him the Crippler. Like, his move set was unlike a lot of other people, and I was I remember I was really excited. He was supposed to be coming to ECW and fighting for the ECW title against CM Punk the weekend that he the weekend that the tragedy occurred. You know, for those not in the know, and I can't imagine there's anybody who doesn't know this, Chris Benoit failed to report for an event, and they weren't sure what had happened, and later on it was discovered that he had killed his wife and son and committed suicide during the time frame that he was not where he was scheduled to be. And it's a horrible tragedy, and I'm kind of sad that WWE has chosen to erase his in-ring career because of it. I think some of the most amazing matches of all time in a WWE ring had him involved. I can understand it from a business perspective, and obviously you don't want to celebrate anything like that, but the biggest question mark coming out of all of this is, what role did concussions play in Chris Benoit no longer being with us, and Chris Benoit's family no longer being with us? and it's something that we may never really be clear on, but I feel like it would have been much better to use this tragedy as a platform to just come out and look at this, like give it a very good hard look. Investigations say that his brain was similar to an 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient. He may not have even known what he was doing. Like, he may have been in the full stages of dementia, and his suicide may have only come after he realized what he'd done. I mean, it could have been a paranoid fantasy that drove him to it. We don't know. We have no idea what occurred on that weekend. We just know that it was a tragedy and that concussions may have played a part, and that concussions are very serious business. I know that WWE has been very good now about concussion checking. If you get a concussion, you're out. They evaluate you periodically. They, make sure that you're okay before they put you back in a ring. But just because a concussion's healed, it doesn't mean there aren't any long-term effects. So, we'll never know. I mean, Bret Hart lost his career to a concussion from a botched kick. He was never really the same again and wasn't able to compete anymore. So it's a very serious thing, injuries in the ring, and the effort that these guys go through to stay in shape and to learn their craft and hone their craft and not injure each other. On top of all of that, they earn my respect for how much they put on the line every time they step out there. Every time they walk out into the ring, there's a chance that this may be the last time. And that's a sobering and scary thought, but they do all of this for us, for the fans, for entertainment. Yes, they're being paid, but what they're being asked to risk, life and limb, is something that no amount of money is worth it. It's us that make it worth it to them. And that's a huge responsibility on our side. So, while I'm not a huge fan of the PG era, I don't think that swear words are a big deal. I don't see the problem with that. I'm glad that a lot of the more overt sexual degradation type storylines are gone, and bra and panties matches have gone the way of the dodo, thank Jesus. But I think the attention to injury and the stoppage of matches due to blood is one of the big positives that we're seeing in the PG era. I think the brand split is ultimately going to be good for everyone, as it'll be less time in the ring and less wear and tear, and less opportunity for injury. I know that they're still doing like full house show schedules, but not working 2 live shows a week the way some of them tended to do, especially the guys on top, can only be good for everybody long term. I've seen a lot of strides in this direction, and it excites me to see that wrestling is actually starting to be out of the darkness as far as injuries and stuff go. People aren't being encouraged to work hurt. There isn't a terrified aspect that if you are hurt, you aren't going to get a payday, or you're not going to be able to make it. It still sometimes happens, but it's not as prevalent as it was in the territory days, when you just had to suck it up and drive on, regardless of how busted up you were. It's still not where I'd like it to be. I would like to see wrestlers no longer be considered independent contractors. I would like to see wrestlers start being given insurance instead of having to pay for it themselves. I understand that is ridiculously expensive, but if managed correctly and booked correctly, and if the back office and management does what they're supposed to do, they're going to make enough money off of the shows that they put on that there's no excuse as to why they can't take care of their talent. And that's my personal thing. I really believe that, if you have somebody who's going out there and putting the life and limb on the line, the least you could do is make sure that they're taken care of should something happen, and not force them to take all of those precautions on their own. And like I said, it's getting bigger. It's nowhere near as bad as it was even 10 years ago, or in the territory days, God forbid, where everybody was a mercenary, and if you got hurt, oh well, that's it. Um, but it's a serious thing, and something that I consider often while watching the product now is what all these guys are doing to entertain me. All the risks that, the men and women who go out there in the ring are taking every time they do it. And I really appreciate it. It's thank you very much for everything that you guys do. Just to give us entertainment and to give the wrestling fans something to talk about. I hope management takes care of you all as well as you deserve, and I hope that everything going forward keeps moving in this positive direction where injuries, while they are a reality of the business, are something that aren't nearly as terrifying or crippling in a permanent fashion. And some people, Corey Graves, Daniel Bryan, some people who've had injuries are still with the company, are still serving an active role, and I think there could be more of that. I think bringing back more managers is not a bad idea. I think there's a lot of veterans and a lot of very cagey, experienced, intelligent people that still could have roles inside the industry outside of in between the ropes if they really wanted it. NXT's always looking for trainers. Uh, the Performance Center really, has stepped up the call for veterans to come in and show the new kids how it's done. And, I saw a whole generation of wrestlers just kind of put out to pasture who passed away early due to drugs or alcohol or mixing the two or injuries or various other things, and I don't want to see that happen again. I don't want to see another generation of wrestlers die before they're my age. Not cool. Very not cool. So, yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. Injuries in professional wrestling, it's a reality, but you know, wow, thank the wrestlers for doing it, and I hope we keep moving in a positive direction. But that's really all for tonight. And looking forward to SummerSlam. Takeover was amazing. The whole weekend of wrestling so far has been amazing, but I'm really excited to see what comes from SummerSlam. We'll see if it can live up to everything else. And with that, Bearded Rogue, out, guys.